We have a committee here that worked on this, and I'd like to identify those committee members now. Sister Janice Tate Gresham, Weed Street Baptist, identify yourself please, campaign worker. Oh my goodness, committee worker. Sister Sarah Stevens, Weed Street. Brother John Jones, who's been running around here with the tie on, and Brother Marvin Fleming from Big Bethel. So thanks to and Reverend Benoit. Where's Reverend Benoit? He's wandering around somewhere.
Well, I want to first start off by just thanking you all for being here. It's a testament to know that in the midst of the weather not being as great as it's been over the last couple of weeks, you all still showed up on Saturday morning. But these are the kind of people today, you all represent the kind of folks that we need that's going to show up rain, sleet, or snow, because this is a historic election, and I'm so happy to be here, and I want to say good morning. So good morning to you. All right, I came from Cumming, Georgia. I came 45 minutes away, sat in traffic on 400, and got there on time. Good morning. Good morning. There we go, so we can start. Well, my name is Daniel Blackman. I am running for Public Service Commission in the state of Georgia. The Public Service Commission regulates your utilities. Whether you know about it or not, it affects you. If you have a light bill, if you have a gas bill, if you have a telephone, they are regulated by your Public Service Commission. The reason why I'm running for the Public Service Commission is because, and to be quite frank with you, I don't want to give you a political stump speech. It's time for us in government, whether you're talking about the United States Senate, or the governor, or the labor commissioner, or Public Service Commission, it's time to get the people's voice back in government. Our Public Service Commission for the last decade has had 4 consecutive rate increases. What that means is that our rates have gone up each and every year for the last 4 years, unopposed, 5 consistent votes. You have 5 commissioners in the state of Georgia. Those 5 commissioners represent the entire state of Georgia. They actually help to regulate our utilities, but they make votes, they make decisions that impact our lives on a daily basis. The reason why that's also important outside of those 4 rate increases in 4 years is because of the fact that we currently have a nuclear expansion in the state of Georgia. Although I support renewable energy, I understand the expansion of nuclear. I understand why they're doing it, because their interest is in nuclear being a cheaper form of energy. I believe there are more hidden costs that go along with nuclear. That's why I support renewable energy. But we are currently about $1.3 billion over budget. In 2009, our state Senate passed a bill called SB 31. What that bill said was that our utility companies are given the power in advance to charge you upfront costs, even if those facilities never go online. And just to give you a highlight of that, in 2017, if those nuclear facilities don't go online, the state of Georgia, you and I, taxpayers, Democrat, Republican, rich and poor, will be paying $2 million per day until those facilities go online. The last thing I'll say is that in 2008, Governor St. Perdue cut what was then known as the Consumers Utility Council. It was the only council in place at our Public Service Commission that ensured our consumer protections and gave us the right to be able to have people speak on our behalf instead of our commissioners, the lobbyists, attorneys, and utility companies. My name is Daniel Blackman, and I'm looking forward to being moderated by Mary Pat Atkins.
And I heard everything that Mr. Daniel said that he supports, but what he did not say, and I'll go ahead and plug him, what he did not say was that he supports the people and that he supports young people. And I have seen Mr. Daniel at lots of rallies and lots of events really standing for the people and for young people. And so we appreciate you for that, Mr. Daniel. And I'm not endorsing any candidates either. So the first question for you, Mr. Blackman, is for about seniors and low income families. Many seniors and individuals earning incomes at or below the national poverty level, and they live in order substandard housing, which essentially wreaks havoc on budgets to pay their monthly utility bills. Aside from sealing windows and doors, what would you consider implementing a different type of reduced payment assistance or voucher program for those who meet certain credit qualifications based on their income?
Well, let me first, I think that's a great question. Number one, we have 1.8 million people in the state of Georgia. For our senior citizens and our disabled veterans on fixed income, when those rates go up, their income does not go up. We currently have things in place. So the quick and short answer that makes the most sense is we currently have low-income heat and energy assistance programs that exist. And as you all know, if you live in the state of Georgia, we've recently endured some of our coldest winters and our hottest summers. What we need to do, number one, is enforce what we currently have. I went to Valdosta, Georgia a couple of months ago, and I sat down with some senior citizens, and we actually sat down and we talked about the fact that there was a utility company in South Georgia that told all the seniors to come to a facility for low-income assistance. They left them in that gym for 4 hours, and no one ever gave them an update on it. So number one, I want to create a program that educates senior citizens in low-income communities by actually getting out of 244 Washington Street where the public service is located and going into the senior homes. One example of that is before I even decided to run for office, I was right next door at the high-rise, and I brought about 60 senior citizens to the rate hearing case on December of 2013, because as those rates went up and the AARP fought to really support seniors and having that moderate, that have that kind of income, I made sure we bought them there, and they were able to see how those rates were impacting them so they could know and be educated.
So, with rate plans for at-risk families, are you willing to look at rates charged to at-risk families and low-income households and do something about that in your first 100 days in office?
Yes, I am, but let me give you the most honest answer and not a political answer. The honest answer is you need 3 votes to get anything passed in the Public Service Commission. I would be 1 vote, so I wouldn't come before you and tell you that I would change that policy overnight. My first 100 days consist of 3 things. Number 1, a political education campaign that went around the state. And we have 159 counties in the state of Georgia. My goal is to be able to reach out to about 10 counties at a time and reach out to those counties and effectually support, and specifically in our poorest areas. And I'll give you an example. In Burke County, Georgia, where our nuclear facilities are right now, it's the poorest county east of the Mississippi River. Yet and still, when they built the facilities, they built them touting new jobs. Well, we can't keep on trading new jobs for our public health. And that's the problem. So what I'd like to do, number 1, is make sure we're letting you all know when these key hearings are so you can show up. Number 2, making sure that aside from us just passing these high rates and putting out bills that are affecting the public, I want to make sure that you all know in advance what's coming and what's available. And number 3, we've got to enforce what's already out there, because the problem isn't that we have stuff in place. The problem is that we're not enforcing them and putting consumer protections in place that protect the majority of people affected by the rate increases.
Okay, Mr. Daniel, now let's talk about high deposits and connection fees.
Yes.
The cost of utility deposits and connection fees are quite steep. However, if based on square footage of a home and a combined utilities deposit and connection fee, it would be quite beneficial if users and consumers were offered a flat rate of trio of gas, electric, and water connection. Is this an option you would consider if elected?
Well, the Public Service Commission does not regulate the water portion of that, but I do support the idea of a flat fee. The reason why I say that is because we currently, as I stated earlier, have had 4 rate increases in 4 years. The problem with what we're doing right now is that we have certain things in place, and I ask that you, I usually write down the question. Can you ask the first part of the question again, just so I can make sure I answer it?
Yes. The cost of utility deposits and connection fees are quite steep.
That's what I need, the deposits. So on the deposit question, I'll give you an example. I spoke to a lady a couple of months ago that has an EMC. An EMC is an electric membership corporation. It's similar to having Georgia Power, but it's retained on county by county. She got there and she called me on the phone and she said, well, I need your help because I just was told that I have to pay $400 deposit just to get my power cut off. What I think should be in place is a ratepayer bill of rights. I think we need to have a clear set of rights established that's signed off by the utility companies, the Public Service Commission, and the ratepayer. Because the problem isn't that we don't have, adequate resources. The problem is we don't have enough things in place that protects them. And I'll give you an example really quick, because I only have 30 seconds for this. The example I give is that in the state of Georgia, the consumer, the ratepayer, all of us, we're charged for all the cost overruns. Those overruns affect the increases in our bills. What I'd like to do is make sure that there's a risk sharing mechanism so companies like Georgia Power, when they profit, if their shareholders are there, they should bear as much of a burden as the ratepayer. If those rates go up, they shouldn't be able to profit while we try and decide if seniors are going to pay for their medication or their light bill. So I agree with the risk sharing mechanism and putting in place a utility ratepayer bill of rights.
Energy efficiency. To help low-income families and those on fixed incomes manage their utility bills, are you willing to look at programs that incentivize landlords to give an extra mile to improve efficiency on their rental units, including increasing insulation, programmable thermostats, and etc.?
Yes. So to answer that question, I think that question is, it's easy for us to say we want to give incentives to landlords and to other individuals to help to support the bills. But the problem is not the incentive, the problem is education. A couple of years ago, the federal government actually gave tax credits if you were willing to retrofit your home in a sense, if you were able to weatherize your home. So they would literally give you, for instance, if you were to weatherize your home in some cases in the city of Atlanta, you were able to get up to $4,000 tax rebate back. How many people in this room knew about it? So the problem isn't the incentivizing, the problem is the education portion. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to make sure that, one, we're in churches like Wheat Street, educating the general public on why you should retrofit your home. And therein lies the problem. I just said retrofit. A lot of people don't even know when I talk about retrofitting their home, they don't understand that we just mean changing out their light bulbs, putting LED light bulbs in the house, making sure that in the winter seasons, your house is lined correctly and energy efficiency is made effective. So what I'd like to do is make sure, yes, I would support those programs, but that's a program we have to support, not just with the PSC, because all we do is overhear the cases brought before us by the utility companies, but I would encourage the cities working with the municipalities to make sure those programs are in place. So I want to give you a closing statement that I want to really speak to your hearts, and what I want to tell you all today is this room is enough for us to win November. What do I mean by that? I know that we can't win with just y'all showing up to vote, but if each of you will call your friends, your family, and neighbor, and even speak to people you don't know, we'll do well. What I want you all to do is two things. The last minute I'll take to talk about me right now, I'm talking about how important it is for our families, our friends, and our children. What we have to do is we have to make sure we, one, educate ourselves, because early vote is about to start. We got to make sure we know from the top of the ballot to the bottom of the ballot who's on there and who protects and has the best interest of us in mind. That's number one. Number two, we need to make sure that whatever we do over the next couple of years, on my flyer, when you get it, I have flyers on this table, on that table, at the bottom of my flyer, my campaign slogan is called Hold Me Accountable. We got to stop electing people and then going to sleep for 3 years, and then when it's time to elect them again, we elect them because they look like us, or we elect them because we think they're doing a good job. We've got to start electing people that we're going to hold accountable. You ask me about my first 100 days, after 30, you should be checking with me to see if I'm keeping up with that first 100. Don't come to me on the 101st day and ask me if I did what I said in the 100 days, because we're going to need that help. Number two, my last point, the reason why you should vote for me in the state of Georgia is for one very obvious reason. The state of Georgia right now is the first state in over 30 years to be approved for new nuclear expansion. Not only are we behind in our nuclear expansion right now and over budget, but Georgia Power has recently began the process of adding 2 additional licenses to have an expansion of 2 more nuclear facilities. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we got to get involved. And what I want to share with you today is that if we invest into our future and into what President Obama does, his clean energy plan, where I'm going to finalize and stop, I support workers, I support every single worker in this state, especially our unions. And I want to ensure that as we transition from the type of energy we're on now to the renewables, we'll not only train the workforce we need, especially our children, 45,000 technical school jobs lost in the last decade. What does that mean? Our young men that can be electricians and plumbers and individuals that can work on these utility projects are not getting the jobs because they're not being educated. So what I want to do is create a pipeline. Instead of a pipeline from school to prison, let's get one from school into the utilities industry, protect those jobs and train the existing workers to be able to install solar panels, get these lines right, and make sure we're protecting the interests of the families and the consumers throughout the state. My name is Daniel Blackman. I thank you so much, and God bless you.
I just want to piggyback on the statement that Mr. Blackman made. He said that we should get the people's voice back in government. I agree with that. I'd like to share something with you. At one time, you had a voice in government. You had what was called a United States Federal Information Center. And that center was established by President Johnson. He felt like it was important for the American people to be able to access their government and get whatever information they need. And so he decided that what we need is an information center where John Q. Public could just call and say, I have a problem with this agency, can you assist me, or whatever the problem is, or whatever the problem was, but that with whatever you were going through, and if a federal agency had any jurisdiction over your particular problem, then you could call the Federal Information Center, and the center would assist you. He decided when he issued that order, he tapped GSA. GSA, the name means General Services Administration. He tapped GSA to be the agency to establish the first Federal Information Center. And GSA took on that challenge, and they established the first Federal Information Center in Atlanta. And I'm glad to let you know I was part of that first staff of the United States Federal Information Center. It was a challenge, but one thing we had to do, we had to learn about every federal agency in the federal government. We had to read as many newspapers as we could possibly read to see what the people were thinking and what they were reporting. And in turn, we would report that to Washington, D.C. and to your representatives. Also, when the Federal Information Center was established, people could walk in with a problem, they could call in or they could write in. And it was our responsibility to respond to them. We were responsible for reading what is called the congressional record. The congressional record is a record of what your representatives did, and you could go on record, you could read what they did, and therefore you could make them accountable for their actions. We also were responsible for the Federal Register. The Federal Register was a paper that was published showing you all the laws, rules, and regulations that had been passed that was going to affect you. Not only that, we were responsible for responding to the presidential compilation. The presidential compilation was a compilation of everything the president did. So in other words, you're looking at what you were considering, you were having a meeting at the minutes of the government. So we were able to do that, and it was very effective. It was so effective until, as the administration changed, some of the administrations decided, we're just telling the public too much. So about 10 years later, they decided, now we need to shut this information system down because we just don't need all this information going forward. And they used the reason for doing that, like everything else, it was always funded, but it was not the funding. It was just they did not want you to know what the government was doing. We told you everything the government did. As a matter of fact, an example, we had a congressman who voted for a very unpopular bill, and when his constituents called his office to ask if he voted for this particular bill, he said no. And they were still concerned because they had heard that he had voted for a bill and that his constituents were concerned about the bill because the bill was not in their interest. So they had called around and they could not get any information, so someone said, why don't you call the Federal Information Center? So they called the Federal Information Center because we knew that he had voted for this particular bill because we had evidence before because it was in the congressional record. But the American public at that time were not familiar with the congressional record. All of those elected officials and other political students were familiar with congressional records. So John Q. Public was not familiar with the congressional record. So when they called the center, we said, yes, he voted for it. We cited the law, and not the law, but we cited the congressional record where they could go and check for themselves. And he was quite upset that we did that. Not only did we do it for him, but we were just what we call the pulse of the public. You could call us for anything. And after they established the Federal Information Center, they decided, well, we need to make sure that they can access this information. So they established what is called the Government Printing Office Bookstore. Some of you might be familiar with GPO. How many of you are familiar with the GPO? Well, you know you can't even use a GPO anymore because that was another form of information. So they shut that down. So in order to be able to get information, you really have to have a knowledge of the computer. I'm not computer literate, so if I wanted to find out what my government is doing, then I would have to have some knowledge of federal agencies, where to go, and how to access the information. I'm going to wrap this up, but I just want to let you know that at one time, we did have an information outlet, but as the administrations changed, they decided that they know too much, so we better shut it down. Now we need to reopen that pipeline. Because without, if you don't know what is going on, then you're subject to whatever happens in your life. So I just wanted to share that with you, let you know at one time we did have the consumer had some place to call and a place to go to. And when we called these elected officials, they responded because they knew that all we had to do was tell the consumer what was going on. So we just kept you informed as to what was going on. So I just implore you to really let us get back together and let us make sure that our elected officials are representing us properly. And the only way we can do that is they have to hear our voices and see our faces. And that's all I want to share with you, that to let you know that we need to put the American public back in a position to control what is going on in our government.
I think what I'd like to do now, though, is talk about what the Secretary of State actually does. Because when we were developing these questions, you know, there's a lot of issues. Certain things like the Commissioner of Labor. You want to talk about the minimum wage. Well, who has the ability to change the minimum wage? Well, the reality is that's both a federal and a state issue. But there's other things that are just a state issue, or maybe we think, well, the governor can do something about voter registration. Well, how much power does the governor have about that? So the Secretary of State really, they do two primary things, really kind of three primary things, I guess. One is they do licensing and registration of businesses and professionals. And they work basically under the rules established by the legislature. So while we might say there is an issue for people coming out of with criminal backgrounds around who gives them professional licenses, well, interestingly, there's a whole lot of licensing boards. There's not just one. So if you want to get a real estate license, you have to go and deal with the real estate licensing board. And then a barbering license. They all have their own different boards. So the Secretary of State works with those boards, which are appointed by who? Who do you think appoints those boards? The governor, that's right. So things kind of work together, but you have to know whose bailiwick it's in. So one of the questions that we had, and the Secretary of State also deals with the primary thing that we're interested in right now is elections, voter registration, and you know, how that all goes. So some of the questions that we had for the Secretary of State were really around voting rights. With the weakening of the Voting Rights Act, how will you as Secretary of State work to eliminate discriminatory voting procedures, including at-large districts which dilute minority voting power? Are y'all familiar with this issue of minority voting and at-large seats? Okay, someone says absolutely. So basically what happens in a lot of places is if there's an at-large candidate as opposed to district candidates, the district candidates give a greater opportunity for underrepresented or minority voters to actually seize power. When there's more at-large candidates, they have to be elected as it says, at-large. And recently, I believe it was in Peachtree City, they had an issue about this because the minority representation in the population is not being reflected in the power that runs their county. So that's one of the things that they could use their power as the Secretary of State to try to investigate that, see who's voting, and how those districts are carved out. Voter disenfranchisement, that's a big, big, big problem. It's estimated that 1 in 8 African American Georgians has a felony conviction. Now, the imam left. That was one of the questions that he wanted to ask, was about people in prisons being able to vote and felons being able to vote. And the reality is, in Georgia, people that are off, what's called off papers, that means you're not on probation, you're not on parole, you have the right to vote. It's a well-kept secret. So be aware of that rule and encourage everyone to register to vote. So same-day registration and voting, there's been a whole hoopla about same-day registration and voting. And I don't know about you, but I think if we had same-day registration and voting like they have in 10 states, 10 states already have that, where you can register and vote in the moment. So what we were going to ask Ms. Carter was, what would she do to implement same-day voting, registration and voting in Georgia? Because we believe that that would really increase the voter turnout as well. In early voting, right now in 11 states have already had early voting. Indiana and Ohio, they already started. They started like this week when I was doing this research. 42 states have already sent out absentee ballots. Early voting has been on the rise over the last 3 decades. According to the Census Bureau, only 4% of voters used early voting in 1974, compared to 30% who took advantage in 2008. In 33 states, eligible voters can cast ballots in person at designated voting times before Election Day. And there's been so much discussion about this having voting on Sunday, and you saw it all, how the current Secretary of State is really, he's trying to remain neutral on this issue, but we really feel like more early voting days would really pick up the pace.
Don't leave the polling site without voting, even if you have to vote provisionally. And if you have a problem, before you vote provisionally, you need to call the election protection line. That telephone number is 1-866-OUR-VOTE. And you need to put that in your cell phone directory, because you need to call at the spot you have the problem. Don't wait till you leave the poll. Call right then and talk to a lawyer. That office is equipped with multiple lawyers who can help you and tell you what to, advise you what to do. But that's another thing you need to know. And then if you need, yes, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Let me see what that is number-wise, because some of you don't have the alphabets, I know. 687-8683. And you can also call for rides to the poll. You can call the People's Agenda at 404-524-VOTE. And that vote is 8683, yes. They can vote either place. If they have been in the other place long enough to be considered a resident, they can vote there, or if they want to vote back in Georgia, they can do that.
So what, they want to make sure that wasn't voter fraud, so
It's too late now. They should have done it. No, it's not too late. I'm sorry. If they're registered in Georgia.
So say for instance, if they live in Ohio, I mean, they go to school at Ohio University.
Okay.
And they live here in Georgia. How many days was it before they became a resident of Ohio?
I don't know. I don't know Ohio rules. They might need to check that. But if they want to vote absentee in Georgia, they still have time. They can get an absentee ballot. And we have applications in the folder here. We have an application and some extra ones over there too, I believe. So they can apply for absentee ballot. I applied for my cousin's absentee ballots last Saturday, and they called me Wednesday and said they had the ballots. So it only takes 2 working days. Yes, you have a question?
Hopefully you can answer.
Okay.
What is the position of an inmate in jail or in prison? You have to wait to get out there, move out, holding doing that, try to deal with inmates.
Is he waiting to go to trial?
No, they locked up.
Oh, okay, they're locked up, but there are some people locked up who are waiting for their trials. They haven't been to trial and they haven't been convicted. They can still vote in jail. But if they have been convicted and in jail, they cannot vote in Georgia. There are 2 states you can vote even in jail after you are convicted, and those are Vermont and Maine. That's what we should be pushing for in Georgia. There is no reason for a person who has gotten into trouble to lose his or her voting rights.
So that leads to my next question. So there's nothing that individual can do when they get out of prison, they're out of jail.
Okay.
There's nothing they can do to restore this.
Oh, sure. Once they get out, they serve their time, they do their parole, they pay all of their fines, and they are off probation. They can register just like I am. Okay?
And I've been out since 20 years, thank God. But I vote, and they made some kind of computer messed up about 2 years ago, and they took my voting right from me. Not about 3 years ago. So, being one of my spiritual development down to the region, we registered to vote, and I got it straightened out. There had been some kind of mistake.
You know what happened? Helen told us about it in the meeting. She said they had run a merge program with some other databases, and they were trying to purge as many people as they could from the rolls, especially people they thought would vote Democratically. Okay? All right. Thank you for listening. Yes.
I just want to speak one thing to the absentee ballots.
Okay.
Reverend Jeffrey Benoit, President of the National Action Network. I'm not speaking on behalf of the National Action Network. I'm speaking on behalf of you, the people, the voter, taxpayer. You, the taxpayer, the tax holder. The absentee ballot is a very, very important tool to use. Why? Because where you have the absentee ballot, you can have a copy of the ballot in which you submitted in case it should get lost in the shuffle. The computers, as we know, are only as good as the users and the programmers. So if it's programmed to default your vote, then you have voted in your mind, but you haven't voted in reality. And that is some of the things that's going on. If you don't believe me, look back at Home Depot and all these other stores who are having these data breaches. It is very easy to breach this data, and they will be loving to breach this data. So where you can go and vote absentee, you got a copy of it, you can get the sample ballot to make sure who's on your sample ballot is on your original ballot. Why do I say that? Because in 2014, that's this year, I was a candidate, but my name wasn't on the ballot. So we're addressing that with the Secretary of State, but I don't want the community to be affected by the fact that you're thinking you're voting, but you don't know who you're voting for, and the person you should be voting for is not on that ballot. The Secretary of State should be addressing this. However, this is a very slow process as it applies to getting to the facts and getting to the brass tacks of what's going on. So utilize that absentee ballot for the purpose of not having your vote lost in data breaches. Thank you so much. Well, we're in computer language, you can program anything. And if the program is programmed to default to a deleted file or to another candidate or to, in fact, it just may not even go through. Let's just go with the very simplest of it, that your vote just deleted. It didn't go through, you understand deletion. And so in the programming, and we're not saying that's what's going on, but can it happen? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Witness flipping. And I went to vote with a senior, more senior than I am. And I witnessed her vote flipping from the Democratic candidate to the Republican.
Absolutely. Where you're sitting there, you're getting ready to press submit, where you think you have voted for your candidate, it can be right there in your face that it has defaulted to another candidate, but in that you're not really astute to that, paying attention to that, you submit and vote for that other candidate by virtue of programming. I do not put nothing ahead of this particular process. So get the paper ballots, get the absentee ballots, and know where your vote has gone.
I want to say,
Question.
I experienced that at the last election, when I submitted, it flipped to the other candidate.
Absolutely.
I immediately called the lawyers, and they checked out the system.
Right.
That happened.
And so this is the computer program, and it's not by accident. Please believe that, it's not by accident. Yes, sir.
So my question is that, because this is the first time I've ever heard anybody suggest that we use absentee ballots as a safeguard to, voter fraud, if you will.
Okay.
And so I want to know how much of a problem, how prevalent is that problem in the existing, voting mechanism?
Well, again, we do understand that computers and technology does what computers and technology does. And as we have looked at Home Depot and a lot of these other firms that have had data breaches, Target, we know that that's very possible, either by a hacker or by just simple programming. And so I say to you, we can't put a number on it, but as a candidate in 2014 on your ballot who has paid his funds to be a candidate on the ballot and I wasn't, I know it happens.
So I just want to, because that's a very interesting point to me. In this day, it seems as though some of the breaches are almost deliberate, and because, there's so much contention in these races and the issue of voter fraud and disenfranchisement. I think it's important for us to get back to the point of having proof to support our electronic submissions. So how can we make that more of that needs to be a staple?
I got your question. How can we rectify this problem?
Yeah.
At this point in time, it's too late in the game to try to get something out there, but these very questions that you have are questions to be addressed with the Secretary of State, showing forth that we have seen this problem, and this problem is systemic and can continue unless we address it. So you're right. But again, at this point in time, we could not really push that they would give it a whole lot of credibility in this late in the game. So we need to be proactive in having our paper ballots to be able to negate the fact that it will be deleted, defaulted, or not even entered into the equation to be counted.
May I add to that, and do not go away because you're doing an expert job, and we appreciate that so much. I'm Janice Tate Gresham, and at the People's Agenda, we learned about the Quitman 10 plus 2. That was a lesson in a case for the absentee balloting, because of the fact that this was a community where it was a majority all white school board, and then some very qualified, educated, doctor degree African American people, women, came forth, and in order to win that race, they went door to door and got people to do the absentee balloting. It was successful. And then they were rode through the courts for 4 years, but they came out a winner this year. This year, that convinced me in hearing. I went to a community where the equipment 10 ladies came. Now here these PhD ladies were drug around in the community like plain old criminals. But they were telling me something that really touched my heart. Older people, they took the authorities to their homes with guns and had them to say, "Is this your ex? How about that?" I mean, that infuriated me. It infuriated me because, you know, how low can you go? And I suspect there are many older people sitting around in some home or somewhere, killing up on these machines, not voting, have the knowledge, the power. And so we've got to do it. And since then, I was fight do absentee balloting, and my husband does, and he's the head of a lodge, and he has all of his lodge members to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to turn this around, and you know, and I love it because I go home, I sit there and study that thing, and then I put it down. I come to a meeting, I learn a little more, I go back and sit down and study, and it works. It gives me time. They are not messing with absentee balloting because probably some millionaire somewhere doesn't go to the polls. They sit in their office and do the easy thing. So let's do like the millionaires. We are in power. We have the power in our hands. We are rich. We are rich with power. And I'm going to use that power. If I don't do nothing else, that's one thing I'm going to do. And you should do it because you don't have to have a reason. It used to be you guys said, well, I got to be away, or I got to, you know, I'm sick or something. No reason. You don't have to tell them why. You just want to do it. Absentee ballot. Stacey Abrams said, #1, absentee ballot.
Can I quickly say something about the absentee ballot? The reason that Equipment 10 were in trouble is because they were accusing them of illegally handling the ballots. And one was accused of letting her grandson take the ballot to the mailbox. When you fill out the application, under your signature, it tells you what relationship can help you with the ballot. And you got some older people who may need help. Now, I told you I helped my cousins apply for the ballot. I cannot help them fill out the ballot because cousins are not listed as close relatives. Now I have to call his daughter to come over to help him and his wife fill out the ballot because they are senior and sort of started dementia. So I can't do it. And so because they could have me arrested. So you want to be very careful who handles the ballot. And the person who handles, even if it's your spouse, has to be at least 18 or over. Your daughter, your son, they have to be 18, even though they are listed as close relatives.
You won't fight if you don't know you're at war. We at war. The media always describe jihad as holy war. Jihad is the struggle against oppression. So whether you like it or not, from our definition, you are in jihad. When you struggle against oppression, when you struggle against your own weaknesses, we know our people have died to get us the right to vote. Our younger people, many of them, they don't vote. They're not educated about voting. So we got a big job to do because we got another generation coming behind us, and we need to keep this effort. I don't care if the two people's here. I don't want anyone to lose the spirit to continue this. The numbers will come if we just continue to do this. But once we drop the ball and say, well, nobody's coming, we just stop it. It's all over. So I just want to thank you.
Tell us your name.
My name is Furqan Muhammad. I'm the imam of the masjid or the mosque down the street from Turnerfield Stadium, 1127 Hank Aaron Drive. And we've been there for over 30 years. And again, many people think Muslims don't vote or religion say you can't vote. We encourage voting and we encourage voter education. So please help us to spread this concept and destroy the misconception that we're anti-America, we're anti-white, we're anti-voting, we're anti-government. All of that is nothing but lies. Thank you.
5 years ago, something happened to us that changed our lives, where God blessed us. We had put in to adopt basically a baby. And we were told not to try and adopt older children because they would have emotional and behavioral problems. That's what the adoption agency told us. 3 weeks after we put in our application, we got a call out of state, and a lady said, there's a mother here that believes you should adopt her twin 4-year-old daughters. My wife and I were very interested. We said, we'd like to come out and meet the children, and we filled out all the paperwork, but they said, you apparently have a problem, you haven't gone through home study yet, which if any of you know about this process, it's about a 1.5-month process, very long, and basically said, I'm sorry, you're going to be disqualified, and basically hung up on us. 5 hours later, the Lord delivered another call. They said, the mother has insisted you are the ones that if you'll drop everything, we'll get you home study, which is why now I have 3 daughters, 1 wife, and 2 female dogs who tell me what to do each and every day. But the problem is, in Georgia, we don't have those same opportunities all the time. Over 400 children died between 2011 and 2013 whose families have a history with the state child protection agency. And the state continues to push children to homes where there's drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and family violence. Fails to give resources for treatment and counseling. I see the time's up, and I'll talk to you more if you have questions about it, but I'm grateful to be with you today to tell you a little bit more about wine.
Hello, Mr. Hedge, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Great. I wanted to ask you a question regarding tenant rights. Often we see renters and apartment complexes turning to the media for help with problems such as mold, mildew, trash, and other unsafe conditions. They're really left with no real advocate and a way to hold the landlords accountable. And if they don't pay their rent, they're subject to eviction. And we see this, and we feel like when you rent and lease, it's pretty one-sided. Would you be willing to investigate the industry for these types of problems and propose protections and measures for the tenants?
Well, I think that's a great question. I do think that when tenants' rights are violated in mass, there's a reason to investigate and enforce the laws for protection of tenants, obviously. You have to have a careful balance in that because you have corresponding rights, but when you're talking about violations of conditions of resident housing, and the violations such as mold, et cetera, that should be a pre-existing condition which would prevent someone from eviction, but it has to be presented and investigated in the right way.
Well, let's talk about understandable contracts. Many contracts are not understandable to the average consumer, and this is because most of them are written in legalese and not in clear language. It is not uncommon for contracts to be nearly 50 pages with language in small font. What will you do to make contracts more understandable to the average person?
Well, I think what the Attorney General would do along with the legislature is ask for I would say, better, more simple language, if you can, between the landlord and the tenant so there's more understanding of tenant rights and landlord rights. And I also think there needs to be some more education opportunities so that tenants, before they sign the contract, understand what they're signing and also what the general law provides. I mean, you've got to be very careful, and also more consumer information about who your landlords are and how they end up responding to tenant concerns, whether they're good landlords or bad landlords, which I think are critical.
Well, Mr. Hedge, many cases, and this is on the credit card theft, many cases of theft via credit card occur at restaurants when the credit card is taken away from the table and leaves the customer's view. Some restaurants are now using technology that allows servers to swipe at the table. This practice would greatly reduce the possibility of credit card theft. As Attorney General, what would you be willing to help change regulations about credit cards in restaurants?
I like that advanced technology. One of the projects we're talking about is an identity theft passport, which is, a lot of people are subject to identity theft. Actually, Georgia is the second worst state for identity theft in the country. And you will find I've actually prosecuted identity theft on behalf of victims. Also worked with Thurber Baker on the first identity theft law in the history of the state. And one of the things that we have to do is, of course, hold companies more accountable. for holding our sensitive information so that it's not given out and our savings depleted. And second, yes, I would strongly favor advanced technology to protect our citizens' sensitive information more.
Okay. Protection for renters. With the downturn in the economy, many renters are shocked to find out that the landlord had not been paying their mortgage. The renters were then subject to eviction, unaware even after they had been paying the rent in good faith. As Attorney General, how would you use the power of your office to assist these renters and hold these landlords accountable?
Well, the landlord should be held accountable for paying the mortgage so you're not subject to foreclosure or eviction. The foreclosure on the property and then the eviction of the tenants. They should be held accountable. The thing that worries us is that there's an inadvertent loss of possession because you're paying on time, the landlord's not paying the mortgage, and the bank is just holding that security deed upon which they foreclose upon or any creditor. So like you, I would want to hold the landlord accountable for paying his obligations under the mortgage.
Many low-income families find themselves struggling to meet basic needs and turn to auto title bonds as a source of quick cash. However, they are stuck, unable to make payments, and lose their vehicle. What would you be willing to do as Attorney General? Would you, one, help people better understand the terms of title bonds? Or would you, two, further regulate title bonds to make these less costly and damaging to families? Or would you do both?
Well, I would say, I think first education is critical to know what you're doing when you do pawn your title and to learn more about what is involved in there. I don't like the idea of someone losing their vehicle without an understanding of the contract they're involved in. And I would support legislation that dealt more stringently with this industry in terms of informing people about their contracts and about the loss of potential title to their vehicle before they sign. And I think there should be some strict language in these contracts that is in bold and 16-point type that lets people know exactly what they're entering into.
In 2013, a study was made and it said that Georgia was number 2 in the nation for identity theft. What would you be willing to do as Attorney General to curb identity theft?
I think it's several things. First of all, I do think you have to, first of all, our statutes are not sufficient in terms of notification of identity theft. You have to have thousands of violations before actually people are notified that their sensitive information has been stolen. So if you have a data breach like in the Target situation, you are subject to a very difficult situation where, if it's much less, people actually may not even know their information was taken. So first, you've got to have laws that present notification to consumers that their sensitive information has been taken and they're subject to theft and loss of savings. Second, I think you need to hold companies accountable for protecting that sensitive information much more securely. And third, advanced technology can help us. And fourth, an identity passport, which other states offer and other attorney generals have, where you actually offer a card when someone notifies you the fact that their credit cards, driver's license, or other information has either been stolen or the information has been taken, and you have to lock up that information. The identity card provides you a state-sanctioned identity that says this person is who they say, allows them to vote, get a loan, and go forward and not be subject to loss by someone else using their identity information.
Now, does anyone in the audience, yes, have a question?
Yes.
Talking about
Outside voice or the mic, your choice.
identifying identity. What about the chip that they're talking about, the ear fuses? Why can't Georgia adopt that, or can institutions like that?
Well, it's coming. And I say it's coming because Europe, like you say, Europe's got it. The chips in the card that make it much more difficult for someone else to utilize your card. It is coming this way. I think that is absolutely the right way to go. I think you're exactly right, and that's where we should be going to the total systems and the other companies and saying, look, this lack of utilization of the same concept that you're using elsewhere would protect U.S. citizens, protect Georgians, and we prefer you to go there. And I hate to do this, but I'm on a tight schedule. I want to tell you this. One of the critical points in our campaign is to make sure that children have a safe place to live. And right now, resources and safe places for children, once they have been removed due to violence, drug abuse, or alcohol abuse by people that are attending for them, is really not budgeted well by our state. And it is a legal obligation of the state once reported, and these reportings are often ignored. As your Attorney General, that's going to be one of my main obligations and main responsibilities that I care about. Also, prosecuting corruption without regard to politics. We are the 50th state in enforcing public corruption and ethics laws. Your state Attorney General paid $3 million to four whistleblowers, even though he could have investigated corruption back in 2011 during his first year. And for the first time in the history of the state Attorney General was sanctioned $10,000 for hiding evidence in a whistleblower case, as opposed to exposing the evidence and actually investigating. My name is Greg Keck. I hope you will go to our website at gregkeck.com. But more importantly, on Monday, early voting. What's that? I'm pretty much close.
He does,
I appreciate it. I'm running to the next, but I wanted to make sure I came here. A very important event. Thank you for all you do. We're grateful for your service. Thank you.
Question that you can respond to.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so, Mary Pat, thank you so much. Mom, you got a winner there. For real, we have a winner there. How about young leaders? Young leaders. I was just shaking my head the other day because, honest to goodness, I was like, I am almost 60 years old and we need to grow some young leaders. And that's when, about an hour later, I had a fabulous conversation with Mary Pat's mom, Kathy. And I was like, yeah, we got to grow us some new leaders. So when we have our next panel, we're going to have 2 students to moderate. And see, we're old, so we're not so good with technology. So we never actually got the bios printed out, even though the young people was trying to help us with the technology. So I'm going to ask Mary Pat Hector before, when Valerie gets here, to briefly introduce the student panel. That would be wonderful. And while we're waiting for candidate Wilson, yeah, we got one quick remark here. I want Sister Ruffin to talk about the amendments on the ballots. Did you have something else you want to talk about, brother?
Right before I left, before we leave.
Uh-huh.
I'll be short.
Okay.
God, peace to everybody. Don't we need God?
Yes.
And I just want to encourage everybody to follow the Bible. Do what God said. Get strength and courage from the Word of God. And in Exodus 3, 4, and 5, it says, don't make no graven image of God. Is that right?
Yeah. Right.
And that means don't make no picture or no image and call it God. And the reason I'm mentioning this, I'm saying this, is because that's where racism got started at, in the high quarters of religion, making a picture of one particular race and calling it God. So a lot of people that's been denied voting rights, such as the poor, African Americans, Caucasians, that wasn't for racism, that stood side by side, African American people, to help them get their rights. Those people should be recognized. So God is not a man. God never was born, and God never died. Let's worship God in spirit and truth, and we'll have the right courage and the right understanding about how we go to get our vote rights and live our life. Thank y'all for listening. We love y'all.
So, yes. Oh, Valerie has arrived. Awesome. I am going to call on 3 people, and if I was a teacher, I could be really crazy about this, but I'm going to be real polite. Neil Sardana, Follow directions, put your address on here. Willie Hart, where's Willie? Willie Hart?
You just step out.
I don't know where Willie is, but Willie doesn't follow directions either, because he didn't remember to put his address on here either. So come on, Neil, get your card, put your address on here. And sadly to say, Sister Dorsey, we need your address. Mary Pat, would you come forward and introduce your student moderators, please? Yeah, you gotta put your address on there. Come on up, Valerie. You want to do it right here? Okay. Students, come on. Young leaders, come on, young leaders. We need young leaders.
Okay, so first let me go ahead and introduce our two panelists. The first is Mr. and this is technology, I'm trying to read it on this little screen. Antonio Jackson. He's a junior biology pre-med major at Morehouse College. Mr. Jackson was born in Virginia Beach, Virginia, but was primarily raised in Stockbridge, Georgia. He is a member of the Morehouse Health Career Society and the Biology Club. Also, Antonio Jackson is a member of the Alpha Lambda Delta Honor Society, as well as the National Society for Collegiate Scholars. Antonio is extremely passionate about helping others in whatever ways possible. He's also a member of It's Bigger Than You, an organization where he serves as the executive board member, as well as the directors of recruitment and membership. Antonio Jackson. Next, Ms. Zarina Mustafa, who was born in Portland, Oregon on July the 6th, 1994. She noticed her passion for the law and advocacy at an early age and went on to pursue her political science degree at Spelman College, where she is currently a junior. Zarina serves as the Spelman College Student Government Association's Secretary of Student Affairs for the 2014 to 2015 academic school year. She also participates as a varsity member of the Spelman College mock trial team. During her summer breaks, Zarina has participated in the Georgia State Zarina has participated in the Georgia State Pre-Law Undergraduate Scholars Program, completed internships with the Coca-Cola Company, and studied political trends and intercultural competency in the Santo Domingo Dominican Republic. Zarina plans to obtain her Juris Doctorate and Master's in Business Administration to pursue a career in the practice of law, in entrepreneurship, and social justice.
All right. Good morning. Good afternoon at this point. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here and staying here. I was in other meetings this morning. I can tell you that running for office, a statewide office, is very taxing because you're everywhere for everybody. But that's okay, because that's why we do what we do. My name is Valerie Wilson, and I am the Democratic nominee for State School Superintendent. I'm excited to be here before you today and to tell you a little bit about why I'm running. I've spent the last 20 years of my life really working very hard to make a difference in public education across this state. For 12 of those years, I served on my local board of education in the city of Decatur. I also served as president of the Georgia School Boards Association. And in that service, I have had the opportunity to see the very, very, very good things that happen in our public education system and some troubling things that happen in our public education system. But I also believe and have great hope for what we can do to transform public education in the state of Georgia. I think my experience working at Fulton County government for 20 years, leading a department, a staff of about 300 and a budget of about $30 million, working as an executive director for a nonprofit, multi-million-dollar nonprofit agency, has prepared me with the business skills to lead one of Georgia's largest departments in the state with one of its largest budgets and largest numbers of people. But I also believe the experience I got working on my board of education and along with some of the people whom I believe are some of the finest educators in this state has given me the education experience. So I believe I have the skill set to hit the ground running on day one to do this job. I am looking forward to becoming your next state school superintendent because I have a focus every single day on doing what is right by all children in this state. And I look forward to serving and talking with you a little bit more answering these questions from this very intimidating panel. Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Wilson, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. My first question is about standardized testing. So much has been in the news lately about testing, particularly with the recent Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal. Many believe standardized tests are fair and objective measures of student ability, and that they ensure teachers and schools are accountable to taxpayers, as well as to the most relevant constituents, who are the parents and the teachers. Others say that the tests are neither fair nor objective, and that their use promotes a narrow curriculum and drill-like teaching to the test, and that excessive tests undermines America's ability to produce innovators and critical thinkers. What are your thoughts about standardized testing?
I think that we have to have a way to assess the work that we're doing in our public schools. We have to know whether or not we are engaging our children and if our students are learning, and if we are being successful in our instruction to our students. But I think we have to be careful about how we use that data or those tests to do that. Let me just say this. When the reform movement came along, we were so focused on trying to make sure that we were getting all of the data to say who hadn't done what and what we need to do, and we lost our focus on educating and instruction. So I think that we need to be sure that we are assessing, but I think it needs to be more about making sure about learning as opposed to punishment or being punitive. And what we have done with our standardized testing is done way, way, way too much of it. It's kind of redundant. The federal government wants us to do this, the state wants us to do this, and our local districts wants us to do this. So children are in a classroom where everybody's trying to cover their butts and make sure that they, and excuse my language, but to make sure that they are getting done the things that they need to get done, and we're forgetting about our children and the instruction that needs to take place. So I do think we need to step back, and I think that we need to make sure, I'm sorry, my time is up, but I think you all know where I was going. We need to step back. We need to make sure that the tests that we are taking are not redundant, but that they are helpful to our students and the instruction that we are providing to our students, and that the tests are fair and accurate in making sure that what we are teaching in the classrooms is aligned with what we're asking them to do on these tests.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So the next question will be on the rural school challenges. Cuts to educational budgets have had a serious impact on student learning and local economies. Many rural school districts spend a large portion of their budget on just getting kids to and from schools. And as local economies have shrunk due to businesses closing and overall lack of development, they are further squeezed. Some of these schools are not even meeting the 180-day minimum school year. So how can you as the school superintendent address this issue?
Well, I think you got my talking point. Let me just say this, and part of my whole, as I have been campaigning and what I felt as a local board member in my district, when I came on my board, and I know I'm talking about Decatur now, but when I came on my board, the split between state funding and local funding was about 70% state and 30% local. When I left my board 12 years later, that had absolutely flipped. 30% of our funding comes from the state, and the other 70%, comes from our local government, and 30% comes from the state now. Now, that's something that we have a tax base that we have been able to manage without having to cut our programs in our city. But when you go to a local community like the one I grew up, see, I grew up in a rural district, so I understand what that means and what that does. That's like in Clay County, where you have, and I've been across the state and seen it, where districts aren't in for 150 days, they're in for about, for 180 days, they're in for 150 days or less, and students are losing valuable seat time. The way that we fix this, or the way that we begin to address it, is to truly make public education a priority. that means that we fund it adequately. We've never funded our public education system adequately. We created a QBE funding formula and we never funded it. I mean, it was never fully funded. So that was back then. Can you imagine now with the numbers of children who have grown and the numbers who have increased, and with the numbers of children who, that was in 85 or 87 when we approved this funding formula. Now our population shift has really changed. We have more children in our state. For the first time ever, almost 60% of our children are on free and reduced lunch. So we have even greater needs, but the numbers of dollars have decreased. So people say I talk about it a lot, but funding is critical to making sure that we are providing the supports that we need. So we need to have our funding back.
Thank you for that. You spoke about the QBE formula, which is the Quality Basic Education Formula, which establishes a state funding formula that all districts receive. Additional funds, however, are received from local property taxes. This creates an uneven funding stream. So as the school superintendent, what can you do to help establish even funding?
I think one of the things that we have to do, and what you said is absolutely true. I just said, I gave you an example in my district where even with the economy, our tax base kind of held steady. Our property tax base kind of held steady. But that wasn't the case in some of the rural areas. There are areas where there is no commercial in communities. So when the bottom fell out, it sure enough fell out. And those communities have not had the ability to try to stabilize themselves at all. I think we need a funding formula and we need a way to fund schools in this district where, yes, there is the dollar amount that goes in, but that we pay extra attention to those communities where you have the greatest needs. Those communities where you have large numbers of free and reduced lunch students in those communities, we've got to shore those up and give them extra dollars. When you look at great states across states who are scoring high and doing well in their public education system, I'll use Massachusetts because I've been reading about them a lot lately. They made a conscious decision to provide the additional funding that was necessary in those communities where they had a higher number of children who were on free and reduced lunch or in their lower income areas. And those students have seen the benefit of that infusion of additional cash because it has allowed them to provide the resources necessary to be successful.
So segueing into the next question, deals with educating the whole child. So with an increase budgetary pressure on local school districts, many schools have abandoned the concept of teaching the whole child. In some schools, students have to pay hefty fees to participate in after-school athletic programs, and music and art programs are eliminated. Physical education and recess have been all but abandoned in many schools. For many children, these programs are quote-unquote lifesavers, and they help to create happy and healthy children in the communities. As school superintendent, how will you work to help turn this around?
Well, I think we have to educate the whole child, so you've got to do that through creative partnerships. You've got to make sure that you are bringing all of the resources in communities and neighborhoods together to help you educate children. I can tell you as a woman whose husband is the athletic director in our school system, athletics have an amount of funding that goes in to pay for the coaches' stipends, but parents have always been the ones who raised the dollars for the athletic side of it. In the arts area though, when you get in and there are arts teachers that get cut because they're not necessarily a part of that core curriculum that we're trying, not Common Core now, the core curriculum that we're trying to provide for our students to make sure that we are hitting all of those reform measure kind of things that we've got to be hitting, course content areas. That's where schools are struggling because the budget isn't there for them to be able to maintain the art teachers. So in most districts where you start to see those first cuts, it's in those areas. But if we are providing the resources that we should, and here I go back again to resources, because when I tell people that things go back to resources, You have to be able to pay for the things in your schools. And when you cut those dollars, in order not to cut the core of what it is that you're supposed to be doing, they do cut those areas. But what I recognize is that for many children, an art class might be the passion that strikes for them, that hits them, sparks them, and wants them to be there. So we've got to figure out how we maintain them in our classes, and you can do that through some creative partnerships.
So my next question is regarding charter schools. Studies show that for math and reading, only 17% of charter schools performed better than public schools, 37% of public school students performed better than charter school students, and 46% of the students the same. In addition, for many working families without flexible scheduling or adequate income and transportation, charter school requirements cannot be met. Further, charter schools are not required to take all students. Charter schools often receive additional funding beyond what regular public schools receive. What is your opinion of charter schools versus normal public schools?
All right, these young people tight over here. Let me just say this, all right? They've been to school. Look, a lot of people think that I am anti-charter schools, and I'm not anti-charter schools. But let me help you understand how charter schools came about. Charter schools came about in New York. They were actually created as a part of the American Federation of Teachers. The guy who created them, I think, was the president of the American Federation of Teachers, or a part of that. And they were created in order to support the work that was being done in our traditional public schools. So you hear what I'm saying? Not as competition, but to support the work that was done in our traditional public schools. They were supposed to serve as the centers of pedagogical innovation in our schools, such that if there are issues in our traditional public schools that we don't have the resources and the ability to try to figure out how we address, why don't we have this laboratory over here where we are looking at these innovative ideas to do it, and then once we've got them in place, then we replicate them in our traditional schools. That's what they were created to do. And when you use charter schools the way they were created to do, and if we could sit down in this state and stop trying to create a separate public school system with charter schools, and just fund our traditional public school system and utilize charter schools collaboratively to do what it is that we should do, then we could have one of the strongest public education systems in this country.
So, in public schools, we know that there are limited activities now because of lack of funds, which come from the budget cuts. So, because there's these lack of funds, what are some direct ways that you can see yourself as state superintendent to get these funds, to get these programs either back up and running or to continue the ones that are about to become extinct?
Okay, the first thing, thank you for that question, because this is where you come into it. I am running for state school superintendent because I am laser focused on doing what's best for kids. And I have no problem whatsoever with standing out front and being that advocate that is out there on the front lines fighting. But we are in a war for our public school system. We really, really are, because it is under attack. So I tell people as I travel across this state, and I mean it, I'm going to come back for you, because we've got to make sure that the legislators over at the Gold Dome hear from the parents and community members that they understand that we are holding them accountable. Just as they are holding us and our school systems accountable, we are holding them accountable. So when they decide that they are going to cut a school system, and I'll just tell you, in Fulton County alone, in the Fulton County school system, over the last 10 to 12 years, they've lost $330 million. $330 million. They have 95,000 students in that system. They lost $330 million, and that impacts their instruction in their school system. So the way that we, not just the states, because you can't elect me, guys, and then walk away and say, fix it, Valerie. You can elect me, and I will stand out front and be the front man. But I need you all behind me. That's what's going to change this and impact this, because it's different when you look up in a committee and you just see me standing there. But when you see a standing room only because parents are watching what you are doing, that's a very, very different kind of atmosphere or environment for legislators to say, oh, we're just going to take these dollars away from education again.
You mentioned creative partnerships earlier. Could you go into brief what that is and talk about a specific creative partnership you plan to implement? So give an example of what that partnership would look like and who you might have that partnership with.
One of the things that we've done, and I am really focused on early learning, because I think that the earliest that you get to a child, the more successful those children will be. In our district, one of the things that we focused on and we created was an early childhood learning center. And when we created that early childhood learning center, of course, we had our local dollars to come to the table, because, you know, once you get past get below a certain age, there is no funding to support you. So I think when you get early Head Start dollars, you know, you're down there around 4 years old, and you get the early dollars, and then you get the kindergarten dollars. But when you want to talk about 0 to 3 years old, because y'all, children do a whole lot of learning these days in 0 to 3 year olds. There are 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds even who can pick up an iPad and play a game on it and know what they're doing. And if we're waiting for those children to get to 4 years old or 5 years old, then we've waited too long. So we've got to have strong partnerships, and part of what we did was to work with all of the early learning community to bring them to the table, to work with the child care communities or the daycare centers in our community to come to the table, to wrap around to say, how do we support the children in our neighborhoods and our communities to make sure they get an early start. So we've shared our curriculum with them. We've done things that will help those children be school ready by the time they get to kindergarten or first grade if they don't get in our early learning center. So those are the kinds of partnerships that I'm talking about. And there are many more for young men, for young women. There are plenty of partnerships that we can look at that can bring to the table to help our children be successful. I think this is my, there's a question.
We're gonna take 2 quick questions from the audience and let you do your close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for taking this question. I just wanted to ask you, being that a lot of the young people, we in society, we moved away from having the knowledge of how our government works. What steps will you take to try to reintroduce civil liberties into the classroom?
I absolutely believe that we do need to have civics in our classrooms. That's one of the things that that as a school board member and as a mom, I recognize that has hurt us, because children don't, they just don't know, because we're not teaching it anymore. I would want to encourage that in our districts, but I do believe in local control. So I can't tell you that the state school superintendent can go into a district and tell a district that you have to provide civics. I can tell you that we can encourage that and work as much as possible at the Department of Education level to hopefully provide curriculum and opportunities for those districts to see how they can integrate that into the work that they are doing. Because I think a part of what we are seeing playing out is one thing that my mama taught me and my dad taught us a long time ago. If you don't know your history, you are bound to repeat your history. So it's really, really important that you understand how government works and how all of that plays in your history and where you come from and how things operate. So thank you for the question.
To health insurance. So we've got to, as I said before, strengthen our investigative portion of the Labor Department to make sure that employers who are misclassifying their employees so they don't get access to health benefits are appropriately penalized, such that they're dissuaded from being willing to continue to practice that way. Secondly, I'm going to help in any and every way that I can for us to bring the expansion of Medicaid and it through the Affordable Care Act to Georgia. In addition to folk being without adequate health care, without access to hospital resources because hospitals are closing all over the state. The Affordable Care Act brings in approximately 70, it's on average, it's anticipated that it would bring in approximately 70,000 jobs. And 70,000 jobs then creates a spin-off effect where businesses are created and communities begin to thrive again. So everything that is within me will be supportive of our Democratic caucus, both in the House and the Senate, to get the Affordable Care Act in Georgia. It is inconceivable that we would deny our citizens, our fellow citizens, affordable, accessible health care simply because of the guy in the White House that got it passed. So, yeah.
Then Bob, you're the last question, and then we'll have a brief close. Mary Pat Hector, you good? Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much, Reverend Jeffrey Benoit, the president of the Clayton Henry chapter of the National Action Network. Now, I promise you, I can't do as good a job as these young folks did. They are too astute. They are just too astute. But we're going to bring my A game, okay? You know, we come from a generation where we were employees, and when we went to work for the government or for the county or for the city, and we had a whole lot of benefits in our package. Today, we are contract workers. In other words, we're not a part of the business. We're not a part of the company. We are just hired help. And our contracts determine how long we're going to be there. And all too often, these contracts, they are built by virtue, if you do a little bit extra, there's a stipend. Let's go back to the Atlanta public school scandal. I'm not picking on them, but a classic example was by virtue of getting scores, there were financial benefits to do so. And so a lot of things were done in order to raise these scores, even if in fact the scores wasn't raising. In other words, they changed a lot of things within the testing piece of it. And so my question to you as it applies to the labor commissioner, are you in favor of consistently going with this contract world that we now live in, or would you be interested in reducing that to where the contracts are no longer a part of what you put in place in order to hire people and not make them a part of a corporation if they don't have benefits? And would you look at increasing penalties for those who utilize this outside of the contractual piece that commits some of these atrocious crimes exponentially? You know, we need to in place our penalties immediately as opposed to giving them a ways out. As an attorney, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely, good question. That goes back to the misclassification. And it is, I had a lady come up to me at an event, at a forum, and she kind of whispered, she said, you know, my husband has all of the perks of being a full-time employee, but we don't have any health benefits because he's classified as a contractor, right? But they call him in home on Saturdays and, you know, everything. But it is an effort to bypass the responsibility of providing health insurance. That flat out, period, that's what this is all about. And again, it requires beefing up the investigative department, which is really in a huge decline at the Department of Labor. But more importantly, we are in a different economy. This is not the economy of our parents.
Absolutely.
And what we really got to do is what a lot of young folk are doing, and that is we've got to get people involved in creating their own business and creating their own generational wealth. And that is something as labor commissioner, I vow to you to bring to the state of Georgia, because it seems to me it's not a benefit for the folk who are in the position of power now, for other folk to create wealth, because, you know, as you create wealth, the more time that you spend actually learning about what is going on, as opposed to being concerned with just trying to survive. And you realize that the folk who are in power to represent you aren't doing anything to actually represent you. So that is something that I am committed to do, is bring, and there are so many programs that the federal government has created, because we see that trend, right? We know that the economy is different now than it was 30 years ago. We know that there's organizations called makers all over the metro Atlanta area, all over the state of Georgia. I know I gotta stop. I saw you not doing that. I gotta stop, sorry.
Because I was gonna ask her if she was already into her brief close. Because we do have a timekeeper, so candidate Chip, 2-minute close. Thank you.
I have had this wonderful, wonderful conversation with people all over the state of Georgia, and what I have found overwhelmingly, whether it is Republican or Democrat or independent or black or white or brown or whatever, is that what people want are state government agencies that actually work for them as they were intended to work. What folk want is the raising of the minimum wage to a livable wage. What folk want is pay equality. As your labor commissioner, I vow to you that I will use my voice every single day that I am in office to make sure that we implement progressive policies that help all of the citizens of the state of Georgia, so that we invest in our human capital as much as we do special interest in corporate capital. Thank you, and God bless you.
You can have a sandwich for sure. Oh, she can't have a sandwich. Oh, it is vegetarian over there, my dear. We have a vegetarian with your name on it right over there. Help yourself. More than happy. So, one of the things I love to do is start on time and end on time and have a productive, fulfilling program. And we had a lot of folks here this morning that left at lunchtime, and wow, shame on them, hey? Hey, people that came and stayed after lunch, because look what we were provided. We were very anxious this morning when candidates didn't show up on time, and we couldn't get a hold of them, and we just stayed in faith, and look what happened. We had a dynamite program. So I'm going to wrap this up really quickly. First of all, I want to say how pleased I am that the churches, some of the 3 churches in the collaborative, Big Bethel, Brother Fleming from Big Bethel, Our Lady of Lourdes, myself, and I see many of us in the audience, and here at Wheat Street, we got together and did a little action here in collaboration like we're supposed to do. And I hope that the word goes out that churches in the cluster can work together on the ground, and that we can provide meaningful programming, supported programming for the community. So I want to recognize my fellow committee members, Sister Sarah Stevens, raise your hand, sister. Sister Janice Gresham, Brother Fleming, Brother John Jones in the back, and our other convening partners, Reverend Benoit from the National Action Network, Mary Pat Hester with the National Action Network, and the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. And I would be greatly remiss if I did not thank our 2 new young leaders that Mary Pat Hector is bringing along. I don't know, maybe they're all bringing along together. Antonio Jackson and Zarina Mustafa. And there's plenty of materials on that table and this table. When does voting start? Right on, people. So to the polls, we heard from Mary Yancey with the faithful voter list. We heard from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We would like to thank the candidates that showed up. Attorney General candidate Hecht, Robin Shipp, candidate Labor Commissioner, Daniel Blackman, Public Service Commission candidate, Valerie Wilson, School Superintendent candidate, and Miss Dorsey here for the non-candidacy. What else have I forgot? Oh, people we're not forgetting, the support staff at Wheat Street. Raise your hand so we can recognize you. Henrietta, Robert, yes, Jones. Queen Bee, really? Okay, what you got for us? We got the Georgia Coalition of the People's Agenda. We're wrapping up. What you got? We're trying to go home. I think Sister Ruffin, by the way, Sister Ruffin, our timekeeper, give it up for her. We have talked about voting down the ballot. We have talked about voter protection. We have given out the number for the Georgia Coalition of the People's Agenda. We have talked about not leaving the polls without voting. We have talked about the importance of absentee balloting. What have we forgotten? Come on, talk to us about what else we have forgotten.
Well, we got the Sunday voting for the first time. And that's all, we shouldn't tell me you talked about that. Helen just told me to be sure that I showed up here to talk about how important it is to vote. And I had a earlier commitment when she told me this last night. So I just made sure I got here today to talk about on election day, regardless of what your status in life, how much money you have, you is as powerful as any person in the world. Your power and your ballot means just as much to you as it do to them. Everybody has one vote, one ballot, and one vote. So you are the same as they are. So if you weren't powerful, remember, they wouldn't be fighting so hard to stop you from being able to vote. So use your power. You have the choice to do what we need done in this election. So please get out, vote early. So if anything comes up, you can start to vote tomorrow. On tomorrow, Helen and the Coalition of the People Agenda will have rides to the polls. If you want to go to the polls starting tomorrow, the 13th, which is Monday, you have a ride to the polls. Call the Coalition for the People Agenda or call me, and I can get you a ride. My cell phone number is 404-386-7461. Marty, I show your hand up.
Bro, I was just wondering, what Monday being Columbus Day, Ron, what? Well, Monday being a holiday, it's Columbus Day. It's still on the calendar.
It's not national, but we have to vote. So voting matters. Black voters will play a pivotal role in this upcoming election and determine what the outcome of these elections are. So let's go to the polls as we never did before. Because there are people in Congress who seek it to stop us from going and take our voting rights away from us. So in order to dismantle the programs that's important to us and important to our community. So we have to show them that we are not going back. God made one direction, and that is forward. So we are going forward. We are not going back. They can't make us go back, and they're not going to take us back. So that's why we need the Affordable Care Act. We need SNAP, the school program. We need to be able to vote, and we are important. And you do matter, and you do count. And I love you, and I'm sorry I was that late.
Right on time. If you did not sign in on the sign-in sheet, please do so. The phone number for the People's Agenda is right up there, and I'm sure you can call and volunteer. It was shown a minute ago. 524 vote. I'm going to call on Dr. Reverend Harris for a closing prayer. And thank you all so much for coming, audience members, and participating here today. Dr. Harris, a closing prayer. Thank you.
Let me again thank you for coming to Lee Street Church. I want to reiterate that our church, as any church, cannot officially endorse any particular candidate, so that all candidates were invited. Those who showed up, certainly their presence was appreciated, but it should not be interpreted that the Wheat Street Baptist Church endorsed the candidates who did show up. I think I need to say that.
All right, make it clear.
Amen. I don't want folk coming in here looking at us and IRS getting involved in business that they don't need to get involved in here at Wheat Street Church. I want to thank the members of Wheat Street who worked so hard in terms of pulling this together. And I want to let you know how much I appreciate you and I thank you. I cannot be everywhere. God could be here and there at the same time. I have to be here or there. I can't be there at the same time. So I thank the members of our church who work so diligently, who become so involved in the community as to make the Wheat Street name known and to represent me even when I cannot be present. Thank you all for coming. I see.
Anyway, let us all stand. Let us pray. Eternal God, we give thanks to Thee for these, your sons and daughters who have gathered here today. We thank you for the work we have done, and we pray that we will continue to remain focused. We thank you for this venue, the Wheat Street Baptist Church, its pastor, and all of those who have worked so hard to make it happen. Now, dear God, dismiss us from this assembly, but never ever from your presence. In thy name we pray. Let every heart say amen. Amen.